It's Platt, and today we try a San Diego Legend. That's next to Platt's Beer of the Week. So the particular beer we have today is the Grapefruit Sculpin. Comes to us from the fine folks at Ballast Brewing. A little background to Ballast Brewing. Ballast was founded in 1996 by a gentleman named Jack White, not that Jack White, in San Diego, California. Now the brewery kind of dates back, or the history, the origins kind of date back a little bit further, back to Jack's college days where he was roommates with a gentleman named Pat Ahern, and they were going to school at UCLA. And around the same time, they both found home brewing. And they were instantly hooked. College is just that time. You kind of find craft beer, you learn new things, what have you. And they both became hooked. Jack quickly realized that even 30 years ago, kind of the pre-days of the internet or whatever, it was hard to find, good quality malts, yeast, stuff like that. There was only a few home brewing stores out there. So Jack, like a lot of good entrepreneurs, decided he was going to fix that and start his own home brewing shop. And that's what he did in 1992, opening the Homebrew Mart in San Diego. Now, about this same time, his roommate, Mr. Ahern, decided to switch colleges, leave UCLA to go to UC Davis and get a degree in their brewing science program. They have one of the better brewing science programs in the U.S., and he was all set to become the first brewer at Ballast Point. But about the time they started opening up, he decided to not become a head brewer and teach science to the children, which sounds like a great idea, but he might regret that, and we'll touch on that in a little bit. Now, in 1996, Jack had already started building a little brewery in the back of the brew shop, but in 1996 he decided to take it fully legal and open it, and what we know of as Ballast Point today, open in the back of that brew shop in 1996, thus changing the brewing history of San Diego forever. One of the first big breakthroughs from Ballast Point was in 2004 when they opened a production facility in the Scripps Ranch area of San Diego. 4 years later, they took another step when they opened Ballast Point Spirits. They were one of the first breweries to kind of get into the brewery spirit things like Rogue did and Dogfish Head or whatever. Their very first product was Old Grove Gin. Gin and vodkas tend to kind of generally be the first products that come out because you don't have to worry about aging. A few years later, in 2012, a gentleman named Jim Bushler came on and was made president and GM of the company. And that probably worked out for him all right, because 3 years later, in 2015, Ballast Point was sold to Constellation Brands for $1 billion with a B dollars. I'm sure after hearing that, Mr. Ahern was kind of regretting his decision about becoming a science teacher. The next year, in 2016, Jack White and Jim Bushler stepped away from the new company. Apparently, there's a little controversy on what was going to happen to the spirits company in the purchase from Constellation Brands. They took the company and rolled it into what we know of as today's Cutwater Spirits. You probably see a lot of their canned cocktails in your local liquor stores, and they do have some other products too, but that Cutwater is what was the old Ballast Point Spirits. And then finally in 2019, Constellation Brands sold Ballast Point to Kings and Convicts Brewing based out of Chicago. I don't know a lot about their story, but apparently they bought Ballast Point from Constellation Brands at a significant discount to the $1 billion. Sounds like Constellation Brands just never figured out what to do with Ballast Point, even though Ballast Point's still a popular brewing today and their line of beers are still well liked. It just never fit into their portfolio. Real quick, let's talk about some of those other beers. First is California Kolsch, 5.2% ABV. This is interesting because just last week, or the previous video we did, BJ's Brewhouse Blonde, they called it a blonde, but then they said it was a Kolsch style beer. Blonde is an ale, Kolsch tends to be a lager. This, they call it California Kolsch, but on the can it says a German style pale ale. I don't know when it became difficult to, categorize a Kolsch. That's been, a pretty popular style of beer for a long time, but somehow some people are, have a little trouble with it. Next is the Sculpin IPA, 7% ABV. This beer is hopped in 5 different stages. This is kind of their flagship IPA. Of course, they have the Grapefruit Sculpin, which might be as popular as the regular IPA. And they have 2 or 3 other varieties, but the Sculpin IPA is kind of their base IPA. Next is Swinging Friars, 5.5% ABV. This is a pale ale, and the official craft beer of the San Diego Padres. Now, the Padres have always been cool. Of all the major sports teams, they probably were the first and most proactive in working with local craft breweries, and that's always cool seeing. And it's a beautiful ballpark, San Diego, sitting outside drinking a craft beer, watching baseball. Just makes sense. And lastly is their Watermelon Dorado, 10% ABV. This is a double IPA. This sounds like an interesting concept to me just because watermelon tends to be kind of a salter fruit, or doesn't have an intense flavor, especially when you're doing infusion, stuff like that. And with a double IPA, and this one has 90 IBUs, so there's going to be plenty of hop bitterness in it. And just be interested to see how that watermelon counteracts or balances out all the hoppiness. Definitely want to keep an eye out for that one. As far as the rest of their line of beers, tend to be more West Coast. I think they do have a couple of darker beers, but they're not producing, big barley wines or a lot of malty beers or oatmeal stouts or anything like that. More of a classic West Coast kind of vibe to it. Well, before we try this particular beer, though, let's check out the stats. So you guys might remember a couple weeks back we did a video where I reviewed the world's strongest beer, Snake Venom, as strongest as far as alcoholic volume. It's got me to think a little bit, and I thought, well, what's the hoppiest beer out there? And just doing a little research, I couldn't find it in my local liquor stores or whatever, and it may not even be produced, but I did find a beer it's called Carbon Smith Brewing, based in Edinburgh, Scotland. Apparently they at least had a beer. And the title of the beer is F Up Your S IPA. I'm sure you guys can read between the lines there. And they claim it came in at a whopping 2,600 IBUs. Just for a little context, the kind of standard scale for IBUs being international bittering units, is 0 to 140, maybe 160. If you generally get over 100 IBUs on a beer, that's one really hoppy beer, unless it's like a barley wine at 15-16%. Usually the IBUs are 100 or higher. It's a really hoppy beer. So 2,600 IBUs, if that's true, and it hadn't been confirmed by a lab or whatever, but if that's true, it's probably undrinkable. As far as confirmed beers, I think Dogfish Head did a beer, San Calagione did a beer a while back. They got into the hundreds of IBUs, but nothing near 2,600. Again, these type of beers probably aren't really drinkable, but I always find it fun that someone's at least trying something like that. Let's see if we get 2,000 IBUs or something fun like that. So if you've tried it, or another beer that may be higher on the scale or anything, please leave me in the comment section. I'd love to hear about these, because sometimes these are really small brewers doing a limited release, so the press doesn't necessarily get out there. Well, enough about that. Let's drink a beer. Now, I've actually had this beer, but it's been 7 or 8 years ago, actually at Torrey Pines Golf Course down in San Diego. I was lucky enough to play with a friend, and that's what they had. That was kind of their house beer at the time, so we took a couple. Real nice copper pour, fairly clear, nice little white head. Oh yeah, plenty of hops on the nose. This is classic West Coast beer. Let's give her a try. You know what? That's nice. Not really getting a lot of grapefruit. Just a nice hoppy West Coast IPA. little malt sweetness up front, not a lot. Body-wise, medium, medium minus. At 7%, I'm not going to say this is crushable, but it does go down fairly easy. Finish. You know what? I'm going to go medium to medium minus. Doesn't stick around a real long time. I mean, you'll get that hot bite toward the back end. Not a lot of malt up front. But a nice, fairly well drinking beer. I could have sworn I remember a little more grapefruit when I tried this before, but overall not a bad beer. I'm not a huge IPA guy, but this is drinkable enough. Well, I hope you liked this video. If you did, please subscribe down below. Also, please like the video because it lets YouTube know we're putting out good content. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or beers that you'd like me to try, please leave them in the comment section, or you can always contact me on the Twitter page. Till next time, bottoms up.